All right, the Chicago Thinker is an independent newspaper that some conservative students have started at the University of Chicago, and they have some remarkable video from an event the University of Chicago's Institute of Politics had been hosting over the last couple of days, from April 6th to April 8th, sort of hilariously titled "Disinformation and the Erosion of Democracy." That's a hilarious title given the participants, who include people like Brian Stelter and Ann Applebaum, Stelter of CNN, Applebaum of The Atlantic. And I'm going to play 3 videos. All these students did was ask 2 fantastic, very smart questions, and it resulted in utter embarrassment for several, from Ann Applebaum to Jonah Goldberg to Brian Stelter. Jonah Goldberg went on offense. He mentioned what happened to Applebaum. I'm going to play that clip right after the Applebaum clip, but ended up looking pretty ridiculous as well. So let's start with this first clip of a University of Chicago student asking a question of Ann Applebaum.
My name is Christopher Phillips. I'm a first year at the college.
Let's take a...
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you for doing this. Really appreciate it. I'm Daniel Schmidt. I'm a freshman at the University of Chicago. My question is for Ms. Applebaum. So in 2020, you wrote, "Those who live outside the Fox News bubble do not, of course, need to learn any of the stuff about Hunter Biden," referring to his laptop, of course. A poll later after that found that if voters knew about the content of the laptop, 16% of Joe Biden voters would have acted differently. Now, of course, we know a few weeks ago, the New York Times confirmed that the content is real. Do you think the media acted inappropriately when they instantly dismissed Hunter Biden's laptop as Russian disinformation? And what can we learn from that in ensuring that what we label as disinformation is truly disinformation and not reality?
My problem with Hunter Biden's laptop is I think it's totally irrelevant. I mean, it's not whether it's disinformation or, I mean, I don't think the Hunter Biden's business relationships have anything to do with who should be president of the United States. So I don't find it to be interesting. I mean, that would be my problem with that as a major news story.
We're going to talk about more of this tomorrow in our...
Okay, amazing. She didn't find it to be interesting because Hunter Biden's laptop has nothing to do with who should be president of the United States, even though the evidence indicates, not conspiratorially so in any way whatsoever, that it's possible the president of the United States, the sitting president of the United States at the time, the former vice president of the United States, is implicated in what's on that laptop in terms of selling access and selling the family name. This is far from conspiratorial. In fact, it's disinformation to suggest there is no evidence for this at that point. So on this conference, co-hosted by a major media outlet like The Atlantic, a prestigious major media outlet, with an Atlantic columnist, with David Axelrod on the stage, they are peddling disinformation. Now, Jonah Goldberg, today, came out and addressed this.
Talk about A to C. They now think that if only the media had told us about the laptop at the time, as the kid yesterday was suggesting, which I don't buy his theory, that Trump would have won. But for the censoring of the New York Post, Trump would have won. And I think it's a preposterous counterfactual, but it's also it's impossible for me to refute. In the same way, I cannot refute that this bottle is keeping all the polar bears away. Right? I mean, do you see any polar bears? Right? I cannot prove the negative. And this is just it has now become...
Can we lock the doors just in case?
It has been wrapped into a much larger narrative, and so when they hear disinformation, they say, "Oh, you mean like Hunter laptop," which actually turned out to be true?
So that is a borderline disqualifying argument for a journalist to make. There is no imperative that stories, if they're true, be important to voters. As a journalist, you are telling the truth. You are, when major powerful people are implicated, your job is to give the public access to that information, not determine whether or not they should care about it. Now, you have to make value judgments, about what's going to go on your front page and what you're going to spend the most time on, et cetera, et cetera. But you don't pursue important lines of inquiry simply because you think you determine as a journalist that this is the most important thing in the world. So that's ridiculous once again. And we have one final clip here of America's sweetheart, Brian Stelter, getting his butt handed to him by, again, a college student.
My name is Christopher Phillips. I'm a first year at the college. My question is for Mr. Stelter. You've all spoken extensively about Fox News being a purveyor of disinformation, but CNN is right up there with them. They pushed the Russian collusion hoax. They pushed the Jussie Smollett hoax. They smeared Justice Kavanaugh as a rapist, and they also smeared Nick Sandmann as a white supremacist. And yes, they dismissed the Hunter Biden laptop affair as pure Russian disinformation. With mainstream corporate journalists becoming little more than apologists and cheerleaders for the regime, is it time to finally declare that the canon of journalistic ethics is dead or no longer operative? All the mistakes of the mainstream media, and CNN in particular, seem to magically all go in one direction. Are we expected to believe that this is all just some sort of random coincidence, or is there something else behind it?
It's too bad. It's time for lunch.
You have 30 seconds.
No, I mean,
Brian.
there's a clock that says 30 seconds. But I think my honest answer to you, and I'll come over and talk in more detail after this, is that I think you're describing a different channel than the one that I watch. But I understand that that is a popular right-wing narrative about CNN. I think it's important when we talk about shared reality and democracy, all these networks, all these news outlets have to defend democracy. And when they screw up, admit it. But when Benjamin Hall, the Fox correspondent, was wounded in Ukraine, the news crews at CNN and the New York Times stopped what they were doing, and they tried to help. They tried to help him get out of the country. They tried to find the dead crew members. That's what news outlets do. That's how they actually do work together, to your question about sharing those kinds of connections and trust. We don't talk about it enough, though. We don't share that reality about how that happens. And with regards to the regime, I think you mean the President Biden. The last time I spoke with a Biden aide, we yelled at each other. So that's the reality of the news business that people don't see, that people don't hear. They imagine that it's a situation that it simply is not. But I think your question, it speaks to the failure of journalism to show our work and show the reality of how our profession operates. We have a lot of work to do, I think.
Okay, that is a man who hosts a show called Reliable Sources, proving very clearly that he is perhaps the least worthy person to be an arbiter of what constitutes a reliable source. Notice how he pivoted instead of responding exactly to the fact that CNN, as the student claimed, has this clear pattern of botching not one story here or there, but major stories and major narratives over the course of years, not merely one story here or there that you have to retract, apologize for, or correct. He completely deflects from that and instead talks about the genuinely decent thing that CNN did in helping other reporters out. Well, what he's not saying there and saying we all work together, we all help each other. They do all work together. And Hunter Biden is, again, a really good example of that. They all worked together to peddle this line. And again, CNN actually hired somebody who was doing this at Politico, Natasha Bertrand, publishing people who were in the intelligence community that were partisan operatives and despised Donald Trump, saying that this the Hunter Biden laptop story in the New York Post seemed like Russian disinformation. They all did that in concert, and they acted in concert with the Biden campaign in Silicon Valley. You had all of the levers of institutional power in this country working in favor of Joe Biden, and the media certainly worked together as part of that, and essentially had a blackout on that story. Now, Jonah Goldberg's not wrong that it's extremely difficult to quantify exactly what the effect on the election would have been, but it's incredible, and it's always worth pausing to recognize. I mean, Brian Stelter does this on, quote, reliable sources every single week, that this is a prestigious American university hosting people like Brian Stelter and Applebaum, who are affiliated themselves with prestigious major international news organizations under the auspices of fighting disinformation. And all they're doing is peddling disinformation and proving more and more what irresponsible actors they are in the media. there's nothing else to say. I mean, you can pick this apart in a million different ways, but it's just handing it on a silver platter, courtesy of actual college students. And the video, by the way, was courtesy of the Chicago Thinker, which, in disclosure, was founded by a longtime Federalist intern, the lovely Evita Duffy. They're doing great work, but college students came in and embarrassed these major media players who could not answer smart but fair and politely ask questions in any reasonable way. And that's because there's absolutely no reasonable defense for the way they conduct themselves as journalists. So with that, I hope you enjoyed the clips. Make sure to subscribe while you're here, and we'll